20 past, so I think we will kick off. Hello, everyone that's joining me today from Australia. A big thank you for joining my session. My name is Donna Edwards, and I'm here to talk to you about the Leadership Balancing Act and how you can achieve success without burning out. About 5 years ago, I was getting really bad jaw pain, and I went to the dentist who sent me to a jaw specialist, and they said that I was clenching at night, and that it was most likely stress related, and that I needed to sleep with a plate on to ease the pain. The specialist said to me, "I can tell you're a type A personality, so this is probably never going to go away because you're always going to be stressed out, and you just need to manage it using this very expensive plate." So I accepted my fate. I wore it every night for the first few weeks until the pain eased up, and then I found that I only needed to wear it a couple of times a week to keep the pain at bay. I started to recognize when the stress would kick in because my jaw would get sore. So it was actually a really good way for me to start recognizing stress and listening to my body. About a year later, I changed jobs. I moved from my general manager HR role into a state manager role, managing a much smaller development team of about 25 people. It was a much slower pace, and within 3 weeks, my jaw completely stopped hurting, and I have never had to wear the plate again 3.5 years down the track. Now, the pace didn't stay like that because, of course, I made sure things grew and we doubled in size, and then I took on a secondment in another state, managing a much bigger team. But I've also come close to burnout a couple of times since then. But what it taught me was to listen to my body's stress signs and to learn some tools and some strategies that I can implement to rewind the burnout, but more importantly, to prevent it from getting to that stage. I do want to acknowledge that this is an ongoing balancing act, and the practical tools and tips that I'm going to share with you today are things that I check myself on and continue to practice every single month without fail. But overall, these things that I've learned have helped me reach a place where I can feel successful, feel like I'm adding enough value, achieve the things that I want, and take the time to enjoy my life and my work without feeling too stressed out or feeling too guilty that I'm not doing enough. So this talk is for people who feel a bit overwhelmed with the noise, the busyness, the distractions, and are looking for some tips to make things easier and clearer. It's not for people who are perfectly content in work and life already. I don't really do a lot of storytelling. My talks are more lots of practical tips and lessons learned, so you might want to take some notes. I've split this talk into 4 key areas. The first is putting your own mask on, so looking after yourself. Working smarter, not harder, which is tips and tricks to be productive. Leading like a pro, so how to ensure your team is achieving, but dial down some of that noise that teams can really create for you as a leader. And finally, success and contentment, making sure that you get to enjoy your work and your life. In order to add value to your company, your team, the people in your personal life, you need to be functioning and be okay. I really love the aeroplane example of putting your own mask on first, because if you don't look after yourself, how on earth can you help anybody else? And how can you be successful? A really easy way to get a sanity check on this is using a wellness wheel. I try and do this once a quarter, and this is a check of our mind, body, heart, and soul. And you give each area a rating out of 10. Where do you want that to be? It might not be 10 out of 10 for everything. For example, gym and exercise, for me, is probably about a 5 out of 10 right now, and I'd probably like it to be a 7 out of 10. I'm definitely not aiming for a 10 out of 10 because that is never going to happen, and it's not as important to me as some of the other areas. So there's going to be a different importance to different people. There's a lot of studies that call out relationships and sleep as 2 of the top areas, so I definitely suggest having a really clear focus on those. And you can tailor the wheels to suit you. So for me, I've replaced the spirituality section with career, because career for me is something really important to keep a track on and give myself a bit of a rating of how I'm progressing and how I'm feeling. The other one is travel. For me, travel is a really important part of my life. It brings me a lot of joy, and it also can be a cause of burnout for me. So I like to keep a track of where that's at and a bit of a rating of it. I remember in January, I was getting a bit overwhelmed with all of the travel after a trip to Chicago and Seattle. And I was, very much not wanting to do any more travel. And now, oh my God, what I wouldn't give to be in Oslo with a bunch of you guys, because I miss travel so much. So whatever works for you, tailor this wheel so that it's appropriate, but keep a regular track on it. We need to acknowledge that we live in a time where stress, worry, and anxiety is at the next level. Look around in the news today and tell me that you don't feel any level of stress or anxiety at what's going on in the world. 77% of people experience stress that affects their physical health. 73% of people experience stress that affects their mental health, and 48% of people have trouble sleeping because of stress. We're not alone, it's very common. Looking after our mental health is really important because we can't help anyone else if we're full of worry and anxiety. And we have this constant stream of things that can cause worry and anxiety that we rarely turn off from. Most of you would know about our body's flight, fight, and freeze responses. And back in the day, this would just happen on occasion when we were getting chased by a lion or whatever. But now our brains and bodies are going in and out of this mode constantly, and it's exhausting for our brain and for our bodies. When our emotions spike, we can't see the full picture clearly anymore. We get an adrenaline boost and we have a laser focus, which helps us outrun the lion. But this is the opposite to actually what we need in most of today's situations. When we're at our calmest and most relaxed, that is when we can think the clearest and when we can see the full picture. I'd like you to take a moment and just ask yourself, how often would you describe yourself as calm at work? I remember the first time I got asked that question, I laughed very loudly because I think the answer was probably never at the time. And then I'd also like you to ask yourself, how often would you describe yourself as calm at home? 41% of workers believe that their biggest barriers to self or family care are feeling distracted and anxious because they're not fully present. We care about so many things, and there's so many things to care about, but we can't care about everything. We have to try to care less because we only have so many cares to give. And we need to be clear about what's important to us and practice calming techniques to get our bodies and minds used to being calm again, because a lot of us have forgotten how to be calm. There's two key areas for that. One is breathing, which you've probably all heard before, but the studies show as little as 5 deep breaths will really bring your body back to that calmness state. So breathing in from your stomach, holding at the top for up to 10 seconds, and then slowly releasing. Just doing that 5 times resets our body. And if we can practice that regularly, it reminds our body how to stay calm. The other thing is framing and reframing, which we're going to delve into a little bit more later. So the beginning of our journey, looking after ourselves and putting ourselves first, is self-development and self-awareness. Developing our emotional intelligence is the start of a much happier and successful life. Lots of companies now assess emotional intelligence when you're applying for a job, and also assess emotional intelligence in performance appraisals. So it's becoming, pretty popular thing. But in short, emotional intelligence has an internal and an external component. Internal is being aware of ourselves, so our abilities, our emotions, and our behaviours. And external is being aware and understanding other people's abilities, emotions, and behaviours. And when you develop these abilities by practicing and practicing, you're able to not only regulate yourself better, but you're able to better control external situations with conflict resolution and empathy. I've mentioned practicing a few times because all of these things can be learned. And one of the reasons that I love working in the IT industry and have done for nearly 20 years now, showing my age, is that the majority of people that I get to work with are super passionate about learning and improving. However, I'm sure we've all come across excellent technical people who get to a certain level and seem to think that the learning stops there. People who don't listen to feedback and don't work on their emotional intelligence and social awareness. This can be referred to as having a fixed mindset. Being successful and happy in your life requires a growth mindset. And a growth mindset makes you more resilient because you can better cope with failure and setbacks. because you view everything as an opportunity to learn and improve. This image is taken from Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, and is definitely worth a read if you haven't. I will have a resources list on my final slide, which will have all of the books that I mentioned in today's talk. The other mindset worth talking about is abundance versus scarcity mindset. I have no doubt that you've all met someone who won't hire people who are better than them because they feel threatened and want to be the best. And I'm sure you've all unfortunately met a manager who is more focused on protecting their job than helping their team be successful. They hold on to all of their knowledge, afraid to share it. These people have a scarcity mindset. Deep down, they believe that for someone else to succeed, they have to fail. For someone else to get a promotion, it means that their job must be at risk. It's a really sad way to live life because there's so much fear and resentment. On the other hand, an abundance mindset is when people realize that we can all be successful. And if we help others be successful, it's just a positive thing for us. Those leaders that help all of their team succeed and see that it creates new opportunities for both their team members and also for them as a leader. They embrace change and they see it as a new learning opportunity. You can see how the growth mindset can go hand in hand with an abundance mindset. And this can be learned as well. Maybe your parents had fixed mindsets and you've been brought up to think that way as well. By developing your emotional intelligence and practicing some of the other techniques that we'll talk about later around reframing and strengths, you can change this mindset and let go of all of the fear. When I learned about locus of control for the first time, I was super excited. I loved it. It made complete sense to me and helped me realize why some people thought and behaved in certain ways. And again, it goes hand in hand with emotional intelligence. Understanding this helped me regulate my own thoughts and feelings better. And being a little bit of a control freak, understanding that internal locus of control gave me the power and control back pretty much no matter what situation I'm facing was a really empowering and exciting realization. For example, my boss yelled at me. Can I control his behavior? No. So reflecting on what I can control helps me. I can control how I respond to him yelling at me. I can control whether I choose to stay working for that boss or not. I can control whether I choose to talk to him about his behavior at another time when he's calmed down and understand, or I can control whether I escalate it to HR or to his boss. Regardless of what happens, taking back control of the situation will make me feel better about it. And locus of control goes hand in hand with framing. Framing is about recognizing what story our brain is telling us and then being able to change it or reframe it. It's something that takes a bit of practice, but it gets easier really quickly and makes a huge impact on our emotions and stress levels. What this isn't is trying to lie to ourselves because our brain is way too clever for that. It doesn't work. But when a situation occurs, our brain pulls together a story that makes us feel a certain way. And the story is based on past experiences and core beliefs. Often these stories are negative, which is not helpful for us. There's two types of reframing: context reframing and content reframing. Content reframing is really just how changing the wording of something can change the way our brain or the person receiving the message feels. So instead of saying, I can't do that for you, you might say, what I can do for you is. So it's a really simple technique, but it works really well. Context framing is like the example on the slide. It's when we either reframe a problem into an opportunity, reframe a weakness into a strength, or reframe the hurtful actions of others into understanding why they're doing that instead of being a victim or engaging in fights, like the example with my boss yelling at me. A really simple one I catch myself doing all the time is when I say to myself, I have to versus I choose to do something. And last weekend, as I was stomping down the staircase towards my study, saying to myself, I was super grumpy, realized I was really annoyed and grumpy because I was saying to myself, I have to go and practice my NDC talk today. And, you know, it's a horrible feeling when you're grumpy and annoyed like that. So I recognized it and I reframed it to myself by saying, no, hang on a second. I want to work on my NDC talk today because I want it to be good. And I'm choosing to do this talk because I want to add value to the people that I'm going to be talking to. And straight away, I felt, excited and energized, and I wanted to do it. So just by doing that little reframe can entirely change how you feel about something. Reframing is one of the things that takes probably the most repetitive practice, but it's definitely worth it. How many of us have read a performance appraisal or any type of feedback and disregarded all the positives and gone straight to what do we need to improve? What are we bad at? What are our weaknesses? What did they say about us? A lot of perfectionists and achiever type A personalities do this, and we want to be good at everything. When I started my MBA about 10 years ago, the first unit I did was organisational behaviour, and we learnt about Gallup's strengths-based leadership theory, and it was mind-blowing for me. Probably one of the things that changed my life so much. I'd spent my entire life focusing on what I needed to improve and my weaknesses. And this meant I spent a lot of my time, especially at work, doing things that I didn't enjoy, lots of process stuff. Because the type of work that people enjoy is based on their strengths. Makes sense, right? So Gallup's Strengths Finder helps you identify your core 3 to 5 strengths, and then the focus is on making them your superpowers. Countless studies have shown that we're more likely to succeed with our superpowers than trying to be an all-rounder and trying to be okay or good at everything. It's also much more enjoyable. The caveat on this is, sure, if you're absolutely terrible at something that you need for your job, you need to bring it up to a minimum standard, say, but certainly you don't want to be focusing on it all the time and trying to make it one of your strengths. So make sure that your day-to-day work is using your core strengths, and it will be a lot more fun and you will be a lot more likely to succeed. The self-development and mindset stuff that we've already been talking about helps us build resilience and deal with stress. Out of a recent survey of 7,500 employees, 67% reported experiencing burnout to some degree. So once again, not alone. Burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion where you feel overwhelmed and emotionally drained. It reduces our productivity and energy, and it's caused by excessive and prolonged stress. There's some really common work and lifestyle contributors that are listed on this slide. I won't read through them. There's also some personality traits that make you prone to burnout and stress. For me, I tick 3 out of those 4 personality boxes, so it's no wonder I've had to work hard on it over the years. Listening to our body for signs of too much stress can help us nip burnout in the bud. I mentioned my jaw pain. It was definitely a stress indicator for me, but now that I've fixed that, I have other signs that come up when I'm getting overwhelmed and getting to that point. One of them is my eye starts twitching a little bit. It's super annoying and super weird, so I can't ignore it. I have to straight away do something to try and dial things back. Headaches are really common. I do get the headaches sometimes as well. And feeling exhausted, even when you feel like you haven't actually done much. So each of us really need to take the time to write down and focus on what our own symptoms are when we start to get overwhelmed or start to get stressed, because that's when we know that we need to engage some of the things that we're going to talk about on the next slide to put things in reverse and hopefully not hit burnout. And some of these things we talked about already because they're ongoing fundamental practices that help us build resilience and understand ourselves better. And that's the wellness wheel, the emotional intelligence, the reframing, really important. 2 of the things that lots of the research calls out as super important are relationships and sleep. Getting enough sleep is super important for our mind and body regeneration. And having a support network of people that we can talk to and people that will listen to us is also essential. For me, another thing in terms of support network is counselling and coaches. Sometimes it's really nice just to have an external objective person to talk to, and that can definitely be helpful. Taking regular breaks as well, I found is more important than ever with the remote working. I assume probably lots of people on here are remote working full time. I'm in week, I think 13 at this point, pretty full on. So scheduling breaks in between meetings is really important, but also having annual leave, which seems so weird, booking annual leave when you can't go anywhere. It just seems silly, but it's actually really, really important that we still take a break and take that chance to reset. Especially, going any more than 3 months without a proper break is quite dangerous for our mental health. I'm very excited to say that I have my first annual leave day booked this Friday, first one in 3 months. So it's definitely needed. Giving back has also been shown to reduce stress and provide positive feelings to help prevent burnout. So another one that I'm a fan of, mentor someone, donate something. I sent some cupcakes to the local chemist after they did my flu shot a few weeks ago, and it made me feel really happy to put a smile on someone else's face. So I'm a big fan of that. And everything on this list is important. And also, obviously, everyone is slightly different. So pay attention to what works for you and what helps you de-stress. I got myself a piano during COVID to learn piano, and it's been an amazing de-stressor for me, even though it's been challenging learning to play as well. But I think because it uses some of the creative bits of my brain that I don't get to use normally day to day at work, it really helps me relax, and it's been amazing. And just the last one I want to call out is practicing that positive self-talk and being kind to ourselves is something that we don't focus on enough. One of the techniques that I use is to ask myself, would I say that to someone else? Or would I speak like that to someone else? And often the answer is no, because we're a lot harsher on ourselves than what we would ever be to someone else. A health psychologist named Kelly McGonigal did a TED talk on how to make stress your friend. Sounds a bit crazy. The talk explains how neurohormone oxytocin, which is also known as stress hormone, works on our brains and our bodies. It enhances our empathy and motivates us to seek support, and it relaxes our blood vessels during stress and helps our hearts regenerate. Pretty powerful. It also releases when we're supporting or caring for someone else. And the more stress, the more that is released, the healthier your stress responses are and the faster you recover from stress. So it's pretty powerful. And I'll let you watch the TED Talk yourself. Once again, I'll put it on the final slide. But the spoiler is that the studies they conducted showed that the belief of stress being bad for you indicated an increase of deaths of 43% over people who were experiencing the same amount of stress, but they didn't share the belief that stress was bad for you. Another study they did, focusing on people with increased stress events in their life, such as financial strain or family crisis, that increased their risk of dying by 30%, showed that if they'd been caring for or helping others during this time, they had a 0% increased risk of dying. So, pretty exciting stats, I think. So it's fairly new on my radar, but I think it makes sense to at least try to think about stress in a different way. When I first started doing some public speaking, I, after a lifetime of being absolutely petrified of public speaking, it was suggested to me by someone that I reframe the feeling of nervousness into the feeling of excitement, because it's exactly the same feeling, it's the same emotions. And that worked really well. So I figure this stress thing could be something similar. So I'm going to give this one a try. We've spent a fair bit of time thinking about our minds and our bodies and understanding ourselves. In this puzzle is understanding what success and what good looks like for us. And I'm talking about success across life, not just work, because there's only one life. So it's work-life integration, not work-life balance, in my opinion. So being crystal clear on what good looks like will enable you to achieve it. And everyone's different. So for some, it might be each year I want to have 2 family holidays, or I want to retire at a certain age. I want to have a specific career achievement. I want to be recognised with an award. It might be finding a life partner or having children. It might be to learn a language. There's a billion different life designs, but figuring out what that picture of success and meaning looks like for you that you can work towards is really important. Working smarter, not harder, is one of my favourite things to talk about, because learning these techniques has definitely saved me from burnout and has definitely reduced my stress levels. The first piece is understanding the difference between being productive and being efficient. You can be super efficient and get so much done in a day or a week. And I've always prided myself on being very efficient. The great thing is, the more efficient you are, the more things you can fit into your day or week or month. So this will not stop you at all from being stressed or burning out. It will let you achieve maybe 3 times as much as your colleagues, but it's not sustainable. And if you're a leader, you don't have this choice anymore because you need to start working in another way through people. Productivity, on the other hand, is what we're going to delve deeply into over the next slides. I'd like to, if you could just ask yourself if you're good at multitasking for a moment. I wonder if there's anybody that's good at multitasking. I'm a woman, so in theory, I'm supposed to be great at multitasking, right? Wrong. Multitasking is not a thing. We can only focus our attention on one thing at a time. And when we split our attention, we can't process all the information. How many times have you been having a conversation with someone and you hear someone behind you having another conversation and you're like, I really want to hear what they're saying. So you try and keep one ear on that conversation and one ear on this conversation. And all of a sudden they've asked you a question and you're like, oh God, I have no idea what they just asked me. Multitasking fail. So please, let's just stop trying to multitask. Being productive is focusing on just one thing at a time. One of my favorite sayings is, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. In order to be productive, you need to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. You need to set goals that are tied to achieving the overall strategy or vision, and then break them down into long-term, so 5 to 10 years, medium-term, 1 to 3 years, and short-term, 3 to 6 month goals. Now, these goals, I'm talking about life goals. Yes, you're going to have some work goals in there as well, but goals in general for everything. And some of your goals, especially in that medium term, 1 to 3 years, might be to keep doing what you're doing. And that's fine, but it's purposeful. For me personally, I have some long-term goals around, working less, traveling more. Then I have a lot of short-term goals for life and for work. But a lot of my medium-term 1 to 3 year goals are to keep doing what I'm doing, because I found that balance that I want for my life, and I'm happy for it to stay that way for the next couple of years. So goals are to be revisited regularly, every 3 to 6 months. I would say do a check-in on how you're progressing against those goals and change them if anything needs changing. There's nothing wrong with changing direction. I've pivoted my life and career multiple times, and there is nothing wrong with that. In order to be productive, you want to be good in these 4 areas. The first one is prioritizing. So really understanding the urgent versus important matrix. We can get so caught up in that never-ending inbox or the random questions from people, and so much of it is not important and not urgent. Why are you getting used to putting things in these categories? Just revert back to the matrix when you're prioritizing your time. If it's not important and it's not urgent, then ideally you either want to delegate it or consider not doing it at all. Procrastination is something I've always been quite good at. So this is something that you don't want to be good at, because it's not a good thing. I remember watching a TED talk once about procrastinating while I was procrastinating my university assignment. Not good. So I know some people that set their own imaginary deadlines for things to try and stop their procrastination, but for me that's never worked because my brain knows that it's not true. So for me, having clear goals and timelines set at quite a detailed level is what helps the most to avoid procrastination. And a couple of the tips that we're going to talk about around structuring our time as well on the next slides. Big rocks refers to those strategic things and those big things that we want to work on or put time into investigating more. And they're generally in the not urgent but important box. And they're the things that always get pushed and pushed and pushed and not done if you haven't created the space for them and if you haven't prioritized them. But they're the things that really, help you deliver results in your job or in your life. So really important to allocate the time. And having clear goals and priorities allows you to push back on things. So when your boss asks you to do something, ideally you want it to fit into one of 3 categories. Either yes, because I have capacity, Either yes, but which of these priorities would you like me to push back or drop in order to achieve this? Or yes, I can do that within this number of days or this number of weeks. You always want your manager to know that you're there to help, but you need to provide them visibility into your goals and priorities so that they understand if you need to push back and they feel like they have some control over it. Giving them this insight also prevents micromanagement from happening in my experience. I've had a few micromanagers in my time, but the worst one I had made me desperately want to quit my job and made me quite miserable. However, it turned out that the job market was not very good at the time, so I was kind of stuck. And, you know, it ended up being a good thing because it taught me a lot about how to deal with a micromanager. I was able to put some structure in place to give the manager the insight that he wanted, and I reported back to him weekly on the progress. And within about 3 months, which was a long 3 months, he completely left me alone and moved on to micromanaging someone else. I've been able to give him that confidence that I had a clear plan, clear goals, and give him that feeling of control by giving those progress updates for him every week. Assessing all of the time-consuming and manual things that you do with the view to simplify them or make them repeatable will also increase productivity. One of the things that I found works really well is using email signature templates. So if you're getting a lot of similar types of questions that are coming from external people, creating those email signature templates as things that you can just quickly reply and send back to them is a really nice way to streamline. For internal teams, creating wikis or single sources of truth so that you can point people to their own self-service option rather than relying on you all the time. And our inbox. Our inbox can be one of the biggest causes of stress and one of the most unproductive uses of our time. So ideally, you want to action emails immediately by either responding, deleting, or moving into a folder. And if they build up and you end up with a giant inbox, rather than let it stress you out, just face the facts that if you haven't gone back to something in a few weeks, you're probably not going to. And if it really is urgent, someone's going to follow up about it. So consider deleting them or moving them into a when I get time folder, and you probably won't go back to them, which means that they probably weren't urgent or important. We can't care about everything. So we need to admit that sometimes we don't care enough to do something, and that's because it's not a priority for us. We put so much stress and pressure on ourselves to care about everything, but we can't make everything our priority, and that's okay. When I used to see people from my team in the office after 5 p.m, I would go up to them and I would ask them if anyone was going to die tomorrow, if they didn't send this tonight, is anybody going to die? If they didn't reply to something or get back to someone, is anybody going to die? And the answer was always no, no one is going to die if you don't stay at work late tonight and finish sending this email or finish doing this task. We need to stop putting so much pressure on ourselves. And sure, if you're a medical professional, then this is probably not a tip for you. But for the rest of us, no one's going to die. So once we're clear on our goals and priorities, we can then schedule our time to be most productive. So using our calendar to block out and allocate chunks of time to strategic work, to projects, admin, emails, and always making sure we're scheduling gaps in our calendar for the urgent and important things that might come up each day. Generally, something comes up at least once a day. So if you've back-to-backed your entire calendar, that's when you start having to work at night because you haven't left yourself gaps during the day. So really important. And one of the things that I've implemented that has worked a charm is reducing the standard 1 hour meeting. Like how often everything's a 1 hour meeting, 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour. Reduce that down to 45 minutes. You actually get the same amount done in the meeting. You hardly notice the difference. It's slightly more efficient, but it creates at least this minimum 15-minute gap for you if you do ever have to back-to-back meetings. And just having that headspace of that 15 minutes, especially working remotely, to go and get a cup of tea or just have a little bit of a break makes a huge difference. Beware of meetings in general though. Don't accept meetings if you don't need to be in them. And like we talked about earlier, push back if there's no value in it. Also push for any meetings to have a clear agenda and request that people prep before the meeting. I read a really great book I read by Michael Hyatt called Free to Focus, had some amazing tips about productivity. And the one that I'd implemented was around purposefully scheduling my week into external days, internal days, and strategic days. And I was telling one of my colleagues about it, and she was saying to me, she was really concerned. She was saying, like, surely you have to be flexible for your customers. Like, how does that work for your customers? But what I said to her is that most of the time, if you give customers some options, they'll find an option that will fit as long as you're purposeful. So if I'm purposeful about saying Tuesdays and Thursdays are my external meeting days, 99% of my customers are going to say, yeah, no problem, that works for me. I can fit that in. But it's when you're not purposeful that you end up with crazy days, doing all sorts of different things, context shifting all the time, and it's really hard to be productive. And what I found is that structuring my week like that made me so much more productive because I was able to focus, get into that flow state, and get through stuff much faster. And I always had time for those big rocks and strategic things that what really ensured my success. I'm also a big fan of running with a daily to-do list as well, but that could be my achiever personality needing to tick things off my list. But more specifically, each day and week, really knowing what are the 3 things that equal success. So this week or this day, if all I get done is 3 things, what are those 3 things? And these 3 things obviously come from your short-term goals that you've set yourself. But doing that takes off so much stress and pressure, makes you feel more like you're, succeeding and ticking the boxes and achieving, but also it's what allows you to continue to deliver results towards those goals. It's a huge shift when you move into a team lead or manager role and have to start delivering through others instead of on your own. And it becomes about motivating others, and it's such a different type of noise. Often a lot more noisy, all of the questions, all of the time. It feels like everybody wants a piece of you. And at the end of the day or the week, you often look around and you're like, what did I even achieve this week? It can feel super reactive and it can be really hard to feel successful. My biggest tip in dealing with people asking you questions is don't answer the question. And that may sound harsh, but hear me out. 95% of the time, the person either already knows the answer or they can figure out the answer if you ask them some probing questions and help them. If you give people the answers all the time straight away, they will just keep coming back to you and the noise will just increase and increase and increase. But if you help them understand how to problem solve themselves and how to think through it and solve it themselves, they will be they won't come to you as much, and they'll also be able to help other people around them do the same thing. And the amount of noise that goes away when you do that over a long period is amazing. The other thing that will give you so much time back as a leader is empowering your team, not delegating to them. In my last role, I had 80 direct reports, mostly developers. It was pretty full on. So bringing together the senior people across the team to share with them the strategy and the vision, or create that with them if it's a smaller organisation and you don't have that yet, is the first thing that you need to do. And then working with those people to come up with the goals to make sure that they're agreed goals within the team. And then once those goals are agreed, really giving complete ownership and empowerment of individual goals to specific members within the team. And then let them go and involve the wider teams to deliver those goals however they want. Give them that full empowerment to deliver, because they're all different as well. They're going to have different strengths. They're going to want to deliver in different ways. So let them. Make sure that you set any expectations of any progress updates or timelines or reporting that they need to be aware of, because that's important. But also make sure that they know that you're there to support them or to remove any blockers that they come up against. So you want to make sure that you're there, that they know that you're there and that you've got their back. Dan Pink's book Drive is one of my favourites on why autonomy, mastery and purpose is so important for people. Definitely worth a read if you haven't already. And we talked about identifying our own superpowers. Well, it's exactly the same for your team. If they're doing what they're good at, they'll be more productive and more engaged. And as a leader, you want to form your teams based on these strengths where possible. Sometimes you don't get a choice to put a team together, but if you are forming a team, think about what are the different hats or roles that are required for this goal or this project in this team, and then bring people in for their strengths. So you might need somebody who really enjoys or who's good at stakeholder management. You might need somebody who is good at, as a good team leader. You might need someone who's an excellent technical mentor. You might need someone who's a great front-end developer or back-end developer, because we know they're not the same person, right? But really think about what those hats are and roles are, and then bring people in that have those strengths, because they're going to be much better at it and they're going to have a lot more fun doing it. Also, when you're recruiting new members into your team, you need to look at exactly the same thing. So what are the strengths gaps within your team? And then look for people that have those particular strengths. Diversity in your team will make it a lot more successful and a lot more fun. As a leader, your life is also much easier if you have an engaged team. So empowering them, giving them autonomy, giving them insight into the strategy and vision, which we've talked about, will play a huge part in engagement. But also the purpose and mastery piece is really engaged by creating a team culture that's built on shared values. If your organisation already has shared values, then break them down and make sure that they're meaningful for your team. But if they don't, then work with your team and create these values together. You can make them core values or principles. At Amazon, we have leadership principles, and then we also create team tenets as well, which helps us define what good looks like for our team and what behaviours we reward. Providing flexibility and choice are two of the other key things that you can provide to your team to keep them engaged. We talked about earlier the worst thing that you can be as a micromanager. No exaggeration, I've interviewed thousands of people over the years, and nearly 80% of them, the reason that they give for leaving their job was their manager. So we don't want to be one of those managers. And the other important piece of that strong team culture is celebrating success and celebrating small wins. So ideally, you want to tie a reward and recognition program to the values, because it will help drive the culture and the behaviours that you want to see within the team. That's what my startup shout out is all about. So it's enabling peer-to-peer recognition, which is really important, but then also tying that into management recognition through an awards program. And this stuff doesn't need to be expensive. If you're looking for ideas on how to do this, I've got plenty of them using whatever current tools your organisation has, because you can do it with anything, Slack, Yammer, but there's also platforms that you can subscribe to and purchase that are specifically built for that as well. It is not weak to be kind. Empathy is called out in study after study as one of the most effective leadership traits. And we touched on it a bit earlier, but I really wanted to reiterate that empathy is a skill that absolutely can be learned and developed. When I did my first personality psych profile close to 20 years ago now, the business coach I was working with at the time said to me, "Wow, I'm not sure I've ever had someone get a 0 on this." And at the time, I was wondering why my staff turnover was so high. It probably took me close to 5 years to get it, to build it and practice and get it to a decent level. But now empathy is one of my highest results when I do these tests. And more importantly, I've learned to really enjoy it, and it has turned into one of my strengths. Empathy is not sympathy. It's just taking the time to listen and understand people and see and feel things from their perspective. When combined with a high emotional intelligence, it's a superpower that every leader wants and every employee wants their leader to have. I'm assuming there's probably quite a lot of people on here from Norway today, so you may not be aware that the icon that I chose for leading like a pro theme is Jacinda Ardern, who's the New Zealand Prime Minister. And I chose her because she's been a really impressive leader over the past couple of years, and empathy is definitely one of her core strengths. I did Google the Norwegian Prime Minister, and I was going to put her picture on here, but I wasn't quite sure from Googling whether she was an inspiring and empathetic leader. So I thought it might be safer not to. Don't want to start a big political conversation. People want and need regular and transparent communication from their leader. And this is another, it will make your life easier if you have a communication plan. It can be really simple, just a structure of why, when, and how. So for example, you might do a weekly customer or project update email. You might do a fortnightly sales pipeline update email, a monthly newsletter, a monthly or quarterly award. You don't have to be responsible for delivering all of these things. You can empower other people to own and potentially automate some. But as a leader, you need to make sure that it's happening, because part of people being engaged is that regular comms. They want to know what's going on and they want visibility and transparency. It's also really important that we take the time to remind everyone in these worrisome times that everything's going to be okay. It's amazing how calming these words can be for people. So we need to try and help ease anxiety for our teams, to just remind them that everything's going to be okay. It's also our role to provide regular feedback to the individuals in our team. And we touched on it earlier that many of us focus just on the constructive or non-positive feedback. And the ratio of positive to negative feedback is 7-1 in order for people to actually take on board the positive feedback and to retain it, and not just listen to that one piece of negative feedback. So it means, that means a lot of great job and thank yous, and the general great jobs and thank yous are good, but the research also shows that people want I can never say this word, specificity here as well. So when you're calling out someone's great work, make sure that you tell them why, how they added value, what they did that was above and beyond, and it will mean a lot more to them and they're more likely to really take it on board. Constructive feedback needs to be immediate, objective, and really clear. Nip it in the bud is another one of my favorite sayings, because if you let things drag on and build up, it gets so much worse and it spreads to the rest of your team. So anything that's constructive, immediate, objective, and clear. We all work hard and are super busy. So part of us having a sustainable and enjoyable life is experiencing success and, better yet, contentment. We've talked about what good looks like and setting goals and celebrating wins, but I also wanted to run through just a few other tips that, in my experience, helps us to stay in this zone and really enjoy our life. Starting with comparison being the root of all evil. It absolutely destroys people. And I'm sure that we've all had friends that are taking a break from social media because they can't cope with it anymore. And often the reason is because they can't help but look at all these people's perfect posts and perfect pictures and compare their own lives to theirs. Why do we do this? Who cares what other people are doing? Well, it's human nature in our society to do this. We talked earlier about defining what good looks like and what success looks like for us. This can help us stop the comparison behaviour, because we have our own clear picture and clear focus of what we want our life to look like. Practicing gratitude is another thing that helps. Being appreciative of what we have in our lives, regardless where we're at in achieving our goals. And reframing as well is quite a handy tip. This picture of a boat is amazing, and if this was one of my friends on Facebook that posted this, just bought me a boat, would I get a little pang of jelly? Sure, I would. But then I'd reframe it and I'd say, do I really want a boat? Like, even if I could afford a boat, how much would it cost to maintain a boat? How much work would it be to maintain a boat? And, how often would I really use a boat? So actually, I'd rather hire a boat, because I probably only want to do that, a few times a year. So if I then want to put that on my what good looks like picture and what success looks like picture, I can. And it kind of takes away that comparison thing, because you know what, I can have whatever I want on my what good looks like picture, as long as it's realistic and I've reframed it to suit. So true story, I do have hiring a boat quarterly on my what good looks like picture, because I do love a good boat party. So we all have control over whether we focus on ourselves and enjoy our life, or whether we are always looking at other people and comparing ourselves. Does anyone roll their eyes when they hear people talking about mindfulness and living in the now? Because full transparency, I do. Those buzzwords are just thrown around all the time. When I look at this picture, I think to myself, It's so beautiful. But if I was sitting there, I would last about 5 minutes before I'd be bored out of my brains. So the meditation type of mindfulness is not for everyone. If it is for you, then good on you, because it's very good for you, but it's definitely not for everyone. So, and I've practiced and I've tried. It doesn't work for me. So for me, mindfulness is about appreciation and moments. It's really easy to soak up every single moment of our time with busyness and distractions and all of the technology. So mindfulness for me is stopping to take a breath a few times a day and just taking a moment to appreciate our surroundings. So some days that might be, I'm sitting in the office and I just take a moment to breathe and to look around the room and, look at my awesome colleagues and be like, oh man, I'm so lucky to work with these awesome people. And, I'm just so glad that I work here. I'm really, really happy right now. Or it might be when I'm going to buy my lunch one day and I'm walking down the street to buy lunch, and I just take a moment and I look up at the clouds and they're just beautiful. And I look around at some of the trees and I think to myself, man, I love living in Perth. Like, it's so beautiful. So it's just about remembering who you are, where you are, and why you are. And it's amazing how doing something so simple can help clear your mind and help you focus on the rest of your day and help bring that calmness back into our lives and that appreciation. Mark Manson has a couple of awesome books and talks about how our brains work and how they need to solve problems. And if you solve all the problems in your life, your brain will actually create more problems for you to solve. And some of those might be problems you don't want. So I don't know whether anyone else has experienced this, but I have blown up my life a couple of times when things were going too well and were too calm, and I solved the problems and my brain created more. That's a new one. So this is not what you want. Thankfully, I've learned this lesson, and now I make sure that my life has plenty of the problems that I love to solve. And I'm not striving to get rid of all the problems anymore, because I know that my brain needs these problems in my life. So if you haven't read the book, definitely recommend reading it and making sure that you know what kind of problems you love solving. Achievement is addictive, and I can say firsthand that being an achievement addict is exhausting, because you always think you'll be happy, successful once you climb one mountain, but you get to the top and there's another one to climb. And there's always something more to achieve if you pin your happiness or success to achievement. And being an achievement addict is a definite path to burnout. Some things that I found can help with this is reframing what achievement is. So for me, not working for a whole weekend is an achievement that I celebrate. Choosing to chill out and watch TV at the end of the day is an achievement. And while I may not be able to completely switch off the drive to achieve, I can still focus it on on the behaviors of what good looks like in the life picture that I'm trying to achieve. Celebrating and seeing achievement as smashing out the work goals that you set for the week, or hitting the savings goal that you set for the month, or going on a family holiday, or taking a day off to go hang out with your family. Really tailor these to suit what's important to you. And acknowledge that you don't have to be on all the time, and make sure that you reward yourself for choosing to turn off. I really love this quote because a lot of what we've talked about today is making sure that we don't burn out and that we do take the time to enjoy ourselves along the way. We only have one life, and when you read the stories about what people regret, at the end of their life, I think it's really important that we're making sure we take the time to enjoy the journey. So summing up, if I had to narrow this down to a few key points, it would be the following 8. Put yourself first. You can't help anyone else if you're stressed or burnt out. And remember your wellness wheel, very important. The second, productivity over efficiency. Being efficient can often mean working harder and longer. Being productive means being smart, simplifying and prioritizing like a pro. Empower over delegate. Delegation gives you short-term capacity. Empowerment gives you long-term capacity and a much happier team. What good looks like. Figuring out what success looks like for you. Set your short, medium and long-term goals based on this. Mindfulness moments each day to enjoy your success and capture gratefulness. Beware the comparison trap. Reframe what achievement means to you. And finally, keep calm. The calmest person in the room has the advantage because they can see the full picture. So big thank you to everyone that's joined me today to listen to my talk. There was lots of other amazing talks going on at the same time, so make sure you jump on and watch the recordings. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or I've got a blog on my shout out website. Always happy to chat if you've got any questions or want to know anything else. A big thank you to the awesome NDC organising committee for pivoting and running this online still. And shout out to my room coordinator, Heather, as well. I will hang around on the Slack channel as well if anybody has extra questions, because I haven't left much time for questions now. So thank you so much.